I'm with you.
Hello, everybody. It's Susan again, and I'm here today with Dustin Cormier, who is an astrologer, a fellow Canadian, and we had the pleasure of meeting each other just last week in person, in real life, in the real world, which was a joy. So I wanted to introduce you all to Dustin as well. And perhaps, Dustin, you can introduce yourself as we will then move on to our look at the full moon in Capricorn and the events of today and these days.
That sounds so great, Susan. It's truly an honor to be here talking with you on your channel like this. My name is Dustin Cormier. I'm a fellow tropical Vedic astrologer. Like you, we've kind of talked about how we've done a lot of, we're both really into Ernst Wilhelm and Ryan Kirksack. And of course, you have just such a plethora of knowledge that I'm very happy to be absorbing from you and sharing with you on your channel like this. I really appreciate it.
Well, the same to you, because you bring in a depth of knowledge that I don't have. And so I think it's
Mhm.
fantastic. It's really complementary. And you were mentioning earlier that we're going to have a chance through you to look at the nodes and then the concomitant eclipse energies that are coming around
Mm,
full moon. So shall we just have a look at the full moon chart to begin, and then you just call in what jumps out from your perspective on the nodes, and I'll just
sounds
share
great.
everybody now.
Sounds
So,
good to me, Susan.
all right, are we seeing that now?
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
I can
great.
see it. Okay.
So what we've got here is our Capricorn full moon. It's the second one. So remember that we've had the first one on the what was it, the 22nd of June. We had a 0 degree, or into the first
Mm,
degree rather, of Capricorn. And because of the way that our calendar months are set up, we now have another one in the same month or rather the same sign in Capricorn. And it's at this fated 29 degrees of the cardinal signs, which is a very important degree. It's considered an anaretic degree or a critical degree in astrology. And it often has something to do with completions and endings in and of itself. It's about also standing apart. People with a lot of 29 energy in their charts really stand apart. They move away from the family, they move away from society, they stand apart typically. And here we have that in the full moon formation, which of course
mm.
brings the sun in 29 of Cancer and the moon at 29 of Capricorn, which itself has been a very influential degree over the last few years, and especially since the eclipse, sorry, not the eclipse, but the great
The
conjunction,
Great Conjunction. Yeah.
yeah, of the winter solstice of 2021, or let's say the December solstice, Capricorn solstice of rather 2020, not 2021. So that was
Mm.
the great conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter, which I'm going to really just quickly bring up.
There's a lot there. One of the things I love when I watch you do your work is that you're kind of a weaver. You pin events in time into the present moment because I think people often forget that astrology, what we see when a transit happens at a certain place, like even this full moon happening at the 29 degrees of Cancer and Capricorn, being so close to Pluto, being so close to when that great conjunction happened, uh, the space holds the memory of the times where transits happened in that space.
Yeah.
So this point where the Great Conjunction happened of 2020 with Saturn and Jupiter at about 0 degrees Aquarius, which was this new burgeoning reality, this new cycle, as we could say, is gonna be tied into the events relating to this full moon.
Yeah, and so let's point out a few of these things that jump out, because the outer ring for everybody is the Capricorn full moon, and we'll talk more about what that means for everybody as well. But let's just have a look at how significant this is in terms of our current situation, our current era. The Great Conjunction of 2020 is the new era as the ancients used to see it. So before we discovered outer planets, Saturn and Jupiter were the reference in terms of the timekeepers. And Saturn is, anyway, the Lord of Time,
Mm.
Lord of Karma, or the holder of our karma in the charts. And today, with the position of Pluto, rather, coming back to Saturn and Jupiter, Pluto is half a degree away, less than half a degree away from that conjunction, and the moon itself is also building to a conjunction with that. So within less than an hour, actually, or just over an hour probably of that, the moon will be aligning with that point and conjoining Pluto in our current sky. And it's a really significant calling in, let's say, of that energy. We have the moon from that great conjunction period, which is being conjoined by Neptune now, and which is retrograding back to it. And then Saturn retrograde today is moving back to the Neptune of that chart. And that is also creating a sextile. So that sextile is something that is also significant, because we're looking at lunar cycles that just keep repeating again over and over, but also we're looking at other features, other energies which are incredibly potent right now. So today we have at the 21st of July full moon, we have a trine from Pluto to Mars. And Uranus is at the 26 degree point, which it roughly is as we're doing this video. And that puts the Uranus in a trine to not only the Pluto of the day, but also a sextile to the moon itself from chart. So again, we're getting a lot of energy recall here in the chart. We've got the North Node that is in a square to the ascendant of that chart. So that particular chart had an ascendant in Cancer. And now we're just moving turning the wheel, as it were, and we're getting a square from that North Node to that ascendant of that great conjunction. And then also we have the square itself having been squared by Neptune. So remember, this great conjunction happened at the time of incredible instability, and Eris herself, remember, was there's Eris in a very Eris at 23 in a very tight square to Pluto all through 2020, much of 2021.
Oh yeah,
it's very much the signature of COVID. And when I say COVID, I'm going to use that as a code for all of it. From the people dropping dead with illness to the idea that none of this was by chance. And so when I say COVID, it's all in. So
cool.
this is the square where we have a tight conjunction with Eris and the North Node, and Mars, the North Node squaring the ascendant, and then that Mars-Eris square with a strong Mars in Aries in a square to
the Pluto.
Capricorn Pluto. So this was what I'm pulling in, what I'm seeing in this chart is that we're in a way rectifying something, or understanding, clarifying, let's say, what was unclear about that Neptune, which was squaring the nodes. Because now we've got Saturn squaring, and it's really, really tight square. It's a 19 degree, less than a degree square. And so now we have Saturn squaring the nodes from that time, where previously that Neptune was confusing.
Interesting.
It was a moment of absolute disruption and confusion. But also we have the Neptune on that moon, and Neptune itself in a trine very strongly at the time of this full moon to the sun. And so this I read as confusion again, in terms of what is true, what is not true, what can be believed, and what we should also consider reliable in terms of guidance. I feel very strongly that when Neptune is very powerful in the chart, we have to walk really carefully. We have to be careful how we interpret anything, because it's very easy to trick ourselves, like to delude ourselves into believing something. And if we take away now the great conjunction chart, we'll just do it like that. We do have this real, this opposition is already a tension between the Cancer energy, which I'd like you to describe in a moment, and the Capricorn energy, and Pluto there with the moon, which puts people on edge. It makes people extremely emotional. So there's an enormous amount of confusion. The moon itself is in a sextile to Neptune, Neptune in a trine to the sun, as I showed before. Neptune is an out of sign sextile to Mars, and it's an in sign sextile to Uranus. So this for me is emotional excitability and people reacting in ways that are unreliable and And this is where I really caution people to take a breath, slow your roll and step back, and allow yourself to uh, perhaps even step back completely from what's going on so that you can come back to yourself before re-entering the fray, if you have to at all, and try to make sense of things before believing anything, because I think we're in a state of flux for several weeks to come.
Mm,
Uranus is squaring Mercury here. They're both in fixed signs. So there's a
right.
disruption around what people believe, what they think. And then Mercury itself is in a trine to Eris. And Eris is really strong at this full moon because she just stationed direct at the time around the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So for those who want to hear my take on the
Mm,
Mars-Uranus, I did a video a few days ago, and you can have a look at that. And it really is about false flag events. And I'm not saying
mm,
XYZ is a false flag event. I'm saying look out for them because they're there. And this will be a time of great confusion. And the more we add to the chaos, the worse it gets. So we really
mm,
have to, the Eris energy, especially on Chiron, in a trine to Mercury for me, is very strongly about clarifying and trying to understand, pointing out hypocrisy, trying to get real. But Mercury is in a fixed sign, it's in Leo, and it tends to think it already knows, it tends to believe what it believes. And
mm,
we need to stay open to questioning. And that's where the Uranus actually becomes very handy. So while the information can also be chaotic and unreliable, which is also that signature of the Uranus, our emotions certainly are unreliable and chaotic as it's trining the moon.
mm.
But we also have the opportunity then to change our way of thinking and to respond in a way that's more constructive.
Great.
I'd like
I
to,
think that's very important, Susan, because I often, there's so many crazy squares happening in this
yes,
particular chart, but we always have to consider that the dynamic energy being opened up by squares like this, especially when it comes to, the espionage, false flaggy kind of stuff, there's always those who are in the interest of humanity, and there's always those who are in the interest of themselves, and they both have power lines open.
yeah,
We can't necessarily just assume that it's only the greedy bad people that are taking advantage of this energy. We all can, and it's just something to for us to remember.
yes, yeah, and also to come back to oneself. And this maybe was where we can jump into that significator of the Cancer and Capricorn opposition, because for me, that's very much about nurturing and taking responsibility. It's in
Mm,
the fundamental sense of that. It's
mm,
about taking care of one's own. So there's that strong energy, which is also a very American signature with the eighth house Cancer, trilogy of planets. There, big energy of planets in the eighth house for the States in
mm.
Cancer, which is about defending one's family and rights and land and territory and so on. But we can also do that in a way that is caring for oneself, tending to one's self, not
Right.
just one's people and property and stuff, but
Mm.
to oneself. So, can you share a little bit about your thoughts on the significators of Cancer and Capricorn? And then maybe start to tie that into the nodal axis,
You
um,
got it, Susan.
and then the eclipses that are coming up.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Susan, and thanks for giving me the space. As I'm really big on the eclipses as you've mentioned, and I'll kind of get into that a bit. But for the sake of it, even beyond the eclipses, the new moon and the full moon happens usually once in every sign as it goes around the zodiac. Uh, and of course, we've just passed summer solstice. So we had our new moon. We had the full moon really on the summer solstice, and then we've had our new moon. Now we're building up to this full moon that's going to be happening in Cancer and Capricorn. Cancer and Capricorn are feminine signs. Uh, Typically, as I've been rolling through Ernst Wilhelm, he describes the air and fire as masculine signs,
Mhm.
and Cancer and water and earth are more feminine signs.
Mhm.
And so feminine kind of is, more relating to this dimension of what we feel, what we have. It's the queen. It is not so much what we do, but what we have and what we are, which is interesting because, I've been talking a bit on my channel about how Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto have all been coasting in a kite formation in feminine signs. And it's going to be in the next couple of years that Pluto has already broken into Aquarius. Uranus is going to be in Gemini, an air sign, just masculine. And then Neptune is going to be in Aries. And if you can see that there's a kite formation happening there. And they're all going to be in masculine signs. So that's going to be a big difference in terms of the outer planets. They've been sitting in terms of the feminine energies of earth and water, which is like, what do we feel? What do we have? Uh, this the full moon happening in Cancer and Capricorn, being in these feminine signs, it's summer solstice. When the sun is in the summer solstice area, it's the time where we are coming into, it's kind of a taking stock.
Mhm.
Summer solstice is a taking stock for all of us. And it's funny because it's the heat of summer. It's a very busy time for everybody. Everyone's always kind of tends to be busy in summer. But you have to kind of blend that in with your heart, your spirit, your needs, your emotional needs. And of course, the full moon is always an integration point of these things. The full moon in Capricorn is kind of saying, you know, how has your relationship with spirit, with Cancer, with spirit, with your deepest emotional desires, how is this being consciously integrated in the world of Capricorn? They're both, even Capricorn's a feminine sign. I think people often think Capricorn is this meaty, masculine, like tough father energy, but that actually is more of a 10th house thing. And the 10th house, while there's a resonance with Capricorn, Capricorn is still, it's a feminine sign. So, taking stock of what do I need to progress? This is what always happens when we get into summer solstice, and especially the full moon of summer solstice, is how has what I need from Cancer expanded into something that is going to help me progress. That's Capricorn.
Mhm.
Cancer is how do I sustain what I need, my heart, my feelings, my emotions, the people around me that keep me emotionally grounded. And when the full moon gets to Capricorn, we're socializing and we're bridging into how do I progress? How do I maintain what my needs are in spirit, but also progress materially, progress in Capricorn things. Um, Something I've been thinking about lately is the phrase that's on my mind is what is the relationship between what we know of as the summer solstice energy, which is again the heart to Cancer. How what is the relationship between my spirit and my business in the material world? Are they off from each other? Are they painting each other? And of course, as we've been talking about, anybody who has any planets or any energies in Cancer or any planets or energies in Capricorn are going to be feeling these themes most deeply right now. Um,
And maybe at this point, I'll just point out the degrees because that's from the way I look at the chart, the important thing for people to look at is not just the degree point of the actual lunation, but around it as well. So you could give it 3 degrees of orb, or I do anyway. I
mm,
don't know, do you give big orbs? I
yep.
think 3 degrees for something like this.
Yeah,
Um,
that's safe. Yep.
yeah, so anywhere between 26 of Cancer, but right into 3 of Leo, which calls in then the Mars retrograde, which we can look at it a little bit later, but the 3 degree of Leo point. And then again, if we flip that, then of course it's 26 of Capricorn and up to 3 degrees of Aquarius.
Hmm.
Includes then our friend Pluto, who's lingering here, but let's get back to you and the
Yep.
Capricorn.
That's a good point there, Susan. And I'd even say it's a funny thing because tropical Vedic astrologers are really big on the whole sign thing.
Yes, yeah.
But as neo astrologers, it's good for us to be mindful of bringing together various traditions. For example, if somebody's got their ascendant, let's say at 2 degrees Leo, or if they've got any important planet at 2 degrees Leo, that is operating through a masculine sign, through Leo, but it is still being entangled in the sun and moon at 29 degrees of Cancer and Capricorn, which means the feminine energy of this full moon is pulling whatever's happening at that 2 degree Leo planet.
Right.
It's good for us to be able to integrate our techniques in this way. But, so the theme here, generally, of course, I'm glad that we started off talking about the big picture kind of thing. Um, in terms of the present time, summer solstice, full moon, taking stock of what we need, because now the energy, if you've ever seen the diagram uh, of the chakras as relates to the signs, you got Capricorn, Aquarius, and then you've got the second chakra, Sagittarius and Pisces. Then you've got the third solar plexus, that's Aries and Scorpio. The fourth chakra is Taurus and Libra. Then you have Virgo and Gemini. And then at the top, the crown, the spiritual zone, you have Cancer and Leo. So once the sun and moon have touched the new moon, the sun has reached Cancer. Now it's moving towards Leo, and then now the energy is moving back down to Capricorn. That's what always happens. Basically, once you're in Leo, the energy is now moving to the root chakra of the planet,
Right.
so to say. And this is relevant to us not only with this new moon, but also with the eclipses.
Full moon, yeah.
I'm sorry, thank you, full moon. So this energy is relevant to us also with these eclipses going on.
Mm.
The eclipses, of course, are moving backwards along the zodiac. That is the north and south node are going to be
Yes, so
moving
now we have
backwards.
north in Aries at 9 degrees and 12 minutes of Aries, and then the south node at 9 degrees, 12 minutes of Libra.
You got it, right? So where the nodes are, for everybody watching, the nodes show you where the eclipses are going to be happening. So there was an eclipse in April, and even last year there was an eclipse in October, and we were already beginning. Really, that one would probably have a more intense energy related to this present uh full moon, because the eclipse of 2023, that would have been
I'm thinking
around
if I have a
October.
chart for that.
Yeah, perfect. That'd be great.
Which,
Uh, no worries either way. I'll just keep rapping about
yeah,
it. The
carry on.
eclipse, the eclipse of 2023, the sun and moon came together in the sign of Libra, and that was probably about like the late 20 degrees of Libra. So that would have already been playing on, again, there's lots happening at the late 20s degrees of the present time. So these are happening in,
Chart for that. But would you like me to look at that for in terms of the transits? I can go back and have a look because if it's relevant.
it's okay. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna pull it together to the main
Okay.
theme. It could be interesting for us to look at, but it's okay. For
Okay.
this moment, I think we got bigger fish to fry.
Good enough going
But
on.
yeah, for sure, for sure. But to pull it all together, Ernst Wilhelm, as well as the evolutionary astrology tradition, there's always a huge emphasis put on the eclipses.
Mhm.
And this is something I always like to bring up because we can talk a lot there, we can talk about the world events happening, but I think for everybody watching, it's also good to know what's happening in the natal chart experience. And the transits are the most transformational moments in the calendar in terms of our personal evolution, our own emotional evolution. Everything's going on in the world and the way it's going on, but what it means to me is often very much mostly correlatable in my experience to the eclipses. So there's three ways we can kind of look at it. Number one is, you know, it's good to look at where the eclipses are happening in relation to your natal nodes. The example I'll give is that my south node is in Cancer, my north node is in Capricorn. Aries and Libra, which is where the transiting nodes are right now. The eclipses are happening at Aries and Libra. So that's a square to my natal north and south node. So that has a certain energy shift that's already happening for me. Aries, the north node of Aries, is moving backwards towards now
towards Pisces.
Capricorn. Right. Yeah, towards Pisces, correct. And then ultimately it's moving towards where my natal north node is. So always keep in mind where the north node is at present in relation to your natal north node. If the north node is moving towards your north node, you are moving towards a Rahu-like experience. You're basically moving
Describe
to,
what that means for people.
sorry?
What would be a Rahu-like experience then?
Right. So for me, I'm 32. And the north node in transit is moving towards my natal north node. So that's going to be my second north node return.
Right.
So that's going to be at 36, Rahu kind of wakes up. And essentially there's more of that Rahu energy. That's where the north node eclipses will be pulling me towards. Uh, in April, again, we had a North Node eclipse, and it's that North Node energy that's kind of happening there.
Can you describe
So
how you see that, the North
sh
Node on Rahu? What
for
it is?
sure, for sure. Thanks, Susan. I will. Uh, when the North Node, like right now, it's in Aries. When the North Node is moving towards, there's quadrants in the chart. The quadrant where the North Node is moving towards your natal North Node. The North Node is kind of the one that we're always pulling towards, and in transit as well. Although this forces us to deal with the transiting South Node eclipses. Now, when the North Node was in Aries, well, the North Node is in Aries now. When the eclipse happened in April, that was a new moon in Aries. I was like all of us, we were all having a North Node eclipse experience. For me, what was pulling me through there is pulling me towards having to make changes because this is square to my natal north and south node. I'm getting out of the K2 zone that I've been in, where I've been kind of taking stock of things. I've got K2 in Cancer. I've been taking stock of my family, my emotions. Now, as the north node moves square and it moves towards my natal Capricorn north node, I feel that I'm moving out of holding on to K2 things and more towards exploring Rahu things. I've been experimenting with my career. I've been talking with people like you on YouTube more. It's less of a letting go with K2. Like K2 is more of like I'm purging karma. And that's what I was doing. It's what we all kind of do around Saturn return 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. You're getting out of that K2 phase and moving towards the age of 36, which is where you have this second north node, second north node return. So everyone's age is going to show where the current transiting eclipses are happening in relation to your own natal nodes.
Right. I'm just going to slow it down for a minute because we're getting a little far away from the full moon energy here, and I'm trying
Thank
to
you,
make it
Susan.
something that we can relate, that people can really directly relate to. A lot of people that are watching probably don't know much about their natal chart, and it's
Oh,
difficult
cool.
without reference to the signs. So we could maybe do another separate video on the sign by sign movement of the nodes and how it comes to different axes and then crosses our
I'm
nose.
feeling that. I'm feeling that.
So
Yeah, yeah. And
let's try and keep this for this year particularly and this lunar cycle so that we can really look at what's going on.
to dial it in. I appreciate that, Susan. So I always like to mention to people that, your natal nodes are important.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of what we're looking at in this present cycle, you also want to be able to look at how the new and full moon is in relation, again, to your own natal nodes, and then also to the transiting nodes. So right now, I'm with you, Susan. Let's pull it into the present lunation that we're talking about. The new moon happened, the full moon is happening on the Cancer and Capricorn axis, and we have the nodes in the Aries and Libra axis. For me, this shows that we are at a certain cycle of moving through and integrating the nodes in Aries and Libra and the eclipses that have been happening. So, for example, if anybody had anything intense happen in April, because the North Node eclipse happened in Aries there, we are now square to that uh to those eclipses, to the eclipse that happened in Aries.
By sign.
So
We need to clarify it's a sign-based square as opposed to a degree-based square.
correct, correct. Thank you, Susan. Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's the other thing, as you mentioned already, the Vedic way or the Indian traditional way of looking at the chart is based on the signs mostly. So you look at the oppositions and conjunctions and so on within the sign as opposed to degrees, which is much more in the Babylonian Hellenistic way of looking at astrology.
Yeah, whole sign, right?
Yeah,
There's
either
the
way is whole sign, but you're looking at the sign-based square, and I would call in the degrees to be more specific. So the sign-based square is there. It's definitely part of the story.
mm,
In this particular reference, for example, we can call in the very first eclipse. When was that eclipse? In 2022. We had an eclipse at 29. It was one where the nodal axis was still in Taurus and Scorpio, I think at
yeah,
4 degrees. And we had a 29-degree Aries eclipse in I think it was also in April of 2022. And that set off this cycle of is it 2022? Yeah. God, I'm
I
losing
think that
track of
makes
time. Yeah,
sense.
we're in 2024. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that was 2 years ago. And so that eclipse is being squared now by this lunation. And that eclipse is being squared by Pluto as well.
I
Uh,
see. So you focus a lot on the tight
on the degree,
orbs.
because then we can really hone in on dates. We can really hone in on a specific event or quality of a time. And so that, again, I lost all of my files in January, so
Mm.
I can't really readily access all of these eclipses from before this year. But it's an important thing, and I'm just trying to recall the date, but I don't want to make a mistake. So let's
Oh,
say
that's okay.
April 2022. That was the
Okay,
very first eclipse that we had in this cycle, in this nodal axis of the Aries Libra axis. And
got it.
we're going to have our very first eclipses in the Pisces and Virgo, or rather Virgo and Pisces axis in September on the 18th.
Mm.
And then the very last one will be on the 2nd of October in this Aries and Libra axis. So what we're looking at here is a kind of a squaring of all of the past, say, 2 years in a way of the eclipse
Mm.
energy, but in a very general way, in the sign-based square.
Right, right, yeah. And the sign-based square, as you're saying it, can show again these it's like a long-running trend
Yeah,
that gives us a sense of a long picture happening, which then allows us to dial in, that's like a background narrative, through which we can now then dial in the tighter orbs, the tighter orb aspects.
right. Yeah, yeah.
So that's why I like to mention it. Right now with the summer solstice full moon that this kind of is, again, uh, the full moon happening in the Cancer and Capricorn axis is square to the Aries and Libra eclipses. And this does give an energy of now, everybody feels throughout the year, their energy kind of changes, right? For me, again, because of my natal nodes, when the sun reaches Cancer, I feel like I've gone past K2 and it's like, a breath of fresh air kind of thing. In the same way, everyone should be mindful of their own nodes, of where the new moon and full moon is passing in terms of how it relates to their own nodes. And in this case, we are all in the square. The sun and the full moon is happening in the square to those eclipses. And that's giving this sort of like, now we're moving towards Libra. Now we're moving towards K2. Now we're moving towards, again, K2 land, which is when we're going to be kind of doing a little bit less of the exploring personally that happened in April. In April, I think everybody, because it was Aries especially, around the time of April, everyone was doing a lot of carving into who am I? What do I want to do? And of course, this carving happens partly because K2 is presently in Libra. So in order to be Aries, you've got to let go of Libra, if that makes sense. You've got to, the North Node in Aries energy is confronting itself through Libra, through other people. I can only stand out in the context of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that eclipse energy. Now we're moving towards Libra. The full moon happening in Cancer and Capricorn is shifting towards the Libra side of things, of dealing with other people, dealing with my friends, and how they're stopping me from doing my Aries thing. That is our kind of long, like you said, the
arc.
the sign square arc, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to mention that and share that as that's something to look forward to. We're coming into this period of, we've done summer solstice. I mean, we're still in the summer. We're still at that part of the year, enjoying ourselves, hanging with friends, hanging with family, taking stock of our emotional needs. And it's a good thing to do because it's going to be useful for us as time goes on. We're moving towards that Libra eclipse, and we're going to want to think about this present square in terms of what it means for this coming rest of the year. Which,
When we
ultimately,
take a look at the aspects between the planets, that can also help add some details to what we're seeing here, because we've got Pluto, it's very this sensitive point of 29 degrees of Capricorn is extremely important in 2023 and 2024. It has been since 2022, as rather 2020, 21st of December, when we had the Great Conjunction. But now Pluto will be going back to that sensitive point. So where we have the moon at this stage is where Pluto is going back to September, October, and most of November. And Pluto is already in the conjunction with this full moon, the moon in Capricorn, and it's in opposition to the sun. So do you have any ideas or significators that you want to call in terms of that, the aspects between the planets and what that might feel like currently, or for people in their individual experience?
So in terms of, so Pluto is going to be, it's going retrograde, and it's going to be
Yeah, so
moving in
Pluto
kind
is
of,
retrograding out of Aquarius once again for the very
right,
last time.
right,
And on, I think it's the 3rd of September, depends on where you live, might be 2nd or 3rd of September, Pluto moves back into that 29 degree of Capricorn. It's
right.
quite significant because it's going to continue to animate this point that has been so strong in our psyche for pretty much 4 years.
Mm,
And this moon, this full moon, is highlighting that quality. It's really pulling in that quality
certainly.
quite dramatically. So
It makes me feel like, if any, pay attention to what happens on this full moon, because any activities that happen during this full moon, we can remember it as time goes on, take stock of it. Some people do astrological calendars, or even, some people will do full moon ceremonies. They'll make an intention. Whatever intentions you make at that time or in this general area of time are going to have Pluto kind of bombarding it, you know, reversing back into Capricorn. And there could be things in the world happening at that time through Pluto in transit that are going to instigate changes related to whatever you do in this coming week. the date would be at July 21st, right? In terms of what exactly, what anybody wants to do with that, it depends on your intention. It depends on what you want to do during that full moon. Do you do any kind of full moon ceremony or anything like
Yes, I
that?
do. Personally, I do. I used to do full moon meditations with my students when I was seeing people face to face. I find it a really beautiful time to acknowledge peak of the cycle. It's
Right.
why I'm finding this particular one very important is because it's not only the peak or the level of awareness of the lunation cycle that we're in, which started at the 5th of July with the new moon that we had, which was on Sirius in the 14th degree of Cancer.
Mm,
But that's the culmination point, let's say, or the peak of awareness of the last 2 weeks. But then we can extend that to the previous 6 months or the annual cycle, where we
right.
go back to the new moon cycle of last year in July, which is now the culmination of that cycle, or rather the new moon cycle of Capricorn, rather, which is last year in December, which is now the
Mm,
culmination point of the full moon cycle of that. So we're looking at this in different cycles, but also from my point of view, because of this 4-year big cycle that has been triggered again and again by the slower planets, which are always time indicators and which are social indicators, indicators of big change. That 29 degrees of Capricorn is now being highlighted in a way that's calling in all of the other energies of the chart, where we have Pluto in a trine to Mars. Mars is now moving into Gemini, where it's not in good dignity. It's not helpful. I've just recently posted a short video and also reposted an older video that I did with Mars and Gemini with all the significators and what that represents. It can be really tricky energy. And it includes energy of in the old tradition, fratricide. It's an energy that is unfriendly, and Pluto is trining this from this very precarious point, this new energy point of the 0 degrees of Aquarius, where it's fragmenting our social fabric, fragmenting our way of showing up and in our individual level. I'll do another video separately on the sign by sign, how this will show up for people individually, but this conjunction with that moon at that really tender degree of the 29 degree of Capricorn, the very initial degree of Aquarius, is reflecting and kind of culminating in 4 years of what we've been experiencing. And we're seeing right now, as we do this video, is the day after there was an assassination attempt
mm,
on former President Trump. And there's an enormous amount of chaos around this. And that's part of the Uranus and Mars conjunction, which is separating now. As Mars moves into Gemini, it's still in a degree-based conjunction. It's no longer in a sign-based conjunction. But that Mars is playing a really big role. Any planet that's at 0 degrees of a sign or the 29th degree is playing a really big role in the story of the moment. And the story of the moment
for
is this.
sure.
And we do have this really strong signature socially of something that people we're at a kind of a breaking point individually, emotionally, psychologically, and collectively. So the moon represents our memories and our hearts, our sense of who we are, or what you could describe as the foundation of identity on a personality level and the
Mm,
mind. But it also represents the populace on a collective level. In mundane astrology, the moon is the people. Uh,
mm,
so we're really at a crux point here. And the one salvation is that we've got a sextile, um, friendly sextile between Jupiter and Venus. And Jupiter itself, though, is not in great dignity. And both
mm,
Mars and Jupiter are ruled by Mercury in Leo, which, as I mentioned before, is in a square to Uranus and therefore a little bit precarious. It's not
mm,
reliable.
mm,
It's
mhm,
trining Eris, it's trining Chiron. There's an enormous amount of opinion in that kind of energy and frustration or explosive engagement. Mercury, of course, representing our friends and our relationships on the contractual level, exchanges between people, the way we converse, the way we discuss things. And
Mm.
it's quite volatile when it's in a square to Uranus. It's
And that's
it's
what's
these are
channeling Gemini right now.
Yes, and so that's this energy that is then being reflected back to the Venus, because Venus ultimately is the ruler of Uranus, and then Venus herself is ruled by the Sun in in Cancer, which is ruled by the Moon in Capricorn. Which I have to come back then again to the dignities, and we have then a Moon that's not in great dignity because it's actually considered to be in its detriment.
Mhm.
Because it's not in its home sign. It's not comfortable. It's in the sign ruled by Saturn, and Saturn itself is ruled by Jupiter, which itself is not comfortable, and it is ruled by, oh, so it keeps going around in this chain.
Yeah, there's a chain
There
there.
is no ultimate dispositor here. And when there's no ultimate dispositor in a chart, things get edgy and
Mm.
things get really difficult. None of the
Unrooted.
planets are in their home space. None of the planets are behaving predictably. None of the energies are secure or safe. And why I want to keep emphasizing that is for our personal well-being, mental, physical, psychological, we really want to keep holding the space for everything around us to be quite chaotic and
Mm.
not reliable in such a way that we turn within and rely on what we do know. We slow down, we smile, we breathe. We know in this breath, I am alive. In this breath, I am here. I know who I am, and let go of all of this otherwise very chaotic energy that's coming up. This is a really powerful trigger point. I mean that in the biggest sense of the word, because I think people will be emotionally and psychologically very powerfully triggered. We've seen that since this attempt on Trump's life.
Mm.
The stories are ranging far and wide, and it's something that is not we don't know. And that's what I was getting at with my Mars-Uranus video. Because
It's
of
very useful.
I just want to pull in the chart of Donald Trump.
Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
I have to, being YouTube, I have to announce clearly and loudly that I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. I am not a Republican. I'm not even voting in these elections. I
Mm.
am simply showing you what the astrology is telling us. Now, I want to call in, this is now a progressed chart on the outside of the United States progressed chart. And this is Donald Trump's chart and how this progression, the United States progression, is affecting his chart. Then we're going to call in the United States itself and see. So we've got Mars by transit of the United States progress chart that is right in between his Chiron and Jupiter in the third house of communication and connection with people, uh, issues around interchanges of ideas, exchanges of ideas that Mars is, again, this is the progressed chart of the US, not the US chart. The Mars
Right.
progression is in retrograde in a very, very strong trine to Uranus. And the energy also of the North Node is just what you were mentioning. It's
Mm.
this Cancer and Capricorn axis,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
North
Wow.
Node is conjoined his Venus very strongly. Now, why I think this is significant, and we have Saturn right next to his Venus, which is one of the reasons that he struggles in relationships.
Mm.
Um, but
I'm not happy in Cancer either.
and certainly not happy. Saturn is showing that he had a difficult life growing up. There is a human being behind this character, and it's important to recognize what they experienced as well
Mm.
and how they got where they are. The So what I wanted to point out here in terms of the progressed energy is that that North Node on Venus is going to backfire in terms of, many people are even cheering on the fact that this person was nearly killed. And,
Right.
we really need to look at ourselves if we get to the place where we are cheering on the death of another human being. We are
Mm.
all connected. We are all part of this scenario. And the other aspect of this is the trine here, rather the opposition between the Mars in retrograde in Libra, again, not in good dignity, and the Chiron in Aries, where because the United States is actually having its Chiron return now, and I'm going to switch to the US chart in a moment. So this is again
Hmm.
progressed US.
Right.
And it has just exited the new moon phase of its progression.
Of
And
it.
that new
Cool.
moon phase in a progressed chart is a really big new cycle.
Mm.
And that new moon phase, as you know, is a very, very important significator of what is coming forward. And that's in a square to the nodal axis. It's squaring the sun and squaring the nodal axis of Donald Trump. And so he was born on an eclipse. He has eclipse signatures are very, very strong for him. So
Oh
that
yeah.
Gemini and Sagittarius energy is very, very strong for him, always going to
Wow.
be triggered by mutable signs. So that new moon progressed United States is squaring his lunation as well as his nodal axis. This event, this thing that happened in where was it, Pennsylvania on
Hmm.
Saturday the 13th, is actually going to favor Donald Trump. It's going to bring him a whole new experience
I
that
mean, it was certainly a devastating thing by all means, but you know, it's possible when these kind of chaotic, cathartic things happen, I could see it working well in Trump's case, you know, like in
yeah.
terms of
Well,
you know,
astrologically, this is what the astrology is telling, that there is going to be, he's going to actually find benefit in this situation for the wrong reasons, because we're looking at
right.
8th house, 12th house stuff. So it's weird, and it's not that it's clear, and it's not even going to be welcome. And that's the crazy part. But it's also part of the United States. Here now we have on the inside, we have the US Sibley chart, which is the chart I like to use. It's the one that lights up when there are major events in the United States. And here we see again, the chart is lit up like crazy. It just proves itself again and again. So we have now on the outer perimeter, we have the US progressed chart. So not the transits, but the progressed chart and how things are shaping up. And remember, as the US progressed chart has a 2932 Pluto, we're going to see Pluto moving back to that point in September, October, November. And this is,
Mm,
of course, the peak election cycle. The
right.
progressed Mars is retrograding back towards Saturn, and that's representing in the 11th house the judiciary as well as Congress. So the judiciary is the ninth, but also the representatives of the law or the legislators are in the 11th house. And so that's Mars backing up over the Saturn there, wreaking havoc basically in civil society. Um, and then also we have Uranus, of course, that is back at 7 degrees, and that Uranus in the um, progressed chart is in a trine to the south node. And I don't know if you do trinal aspects to the nodes, but I look at the
Yep.
trinal aspects, so it's in a sextile to the north node, trining the south node. So there's something here that is backing into that trine that is suggesting a really big shift in terms of the direction that the United States is taking.
Mm,
I want to just call in as well. We'll get rid of the progress chart and we're going to go to transit. So this is the United States now in the transits of today. So this is the 14th of July. Actually, perhaps best is to pull in. Uh, uh,
it's amazing that America is still going through its Pluto return.
yeah.
It hasn't
uh,
fully come into Aquarius, so
No,
there's
and
a
it's an extended Pluto return because I give Pluto anyway a 2-degree orb. So it's not just 2 degrees from 2733, but it's 2 degrees for me in the progress chart from 2932. So
yeah.
we still have well into the second degree, 2.5 degrees sorry, 1.5 degrees up to 2 degrees of Aquarius. So that will perfect next year for the second time. So we're getting this over the last year and this year, 2023 and 2024, but into 2025, we're still in the US Pluto return, which is happening at the same time as we're getting the Chiron return for the US. I've done a video on this, and I did a video on the on the transits for the US in 2024, and you'll find that on my channel. It's not a great year, and there's no way to paint that in a pretty way. It's just
Mm.
not a great year.
Yeah, but
So
again, we have to go through this shadow one
yeah,
way or the other. The only way out of it is through it.
yeah. What I think I'll do is I'm going to pull the transits just really briefly back to what was happening on the 13th. I'm just going to edit the transit chart to reflect the 13th, and I think the time was, if I'm correct, it was somewhere around 4 p.m. and I think it may have been and I've forgotten the name of the town.
Oh,
Oh well,
certainly I could.
I'm gonna put Pittsburgh, because I think it was near Pittsburgh, so I'm just gonna put Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the name of the town. Let's just have a quick look. I just want to show people, because I know this will be on many people's mind.
Mm.
So
It's
Pittsburgh
a
would
big
not
event.
Pennsylvania, please. There we go.
Gosh, I wish I had my phone. Oh, I do have my phone. Maybe I'll look it up. Just be
Yeah,
sure.
if you can give me the exact location, that's great. Otherwise, I've ended up with Philadelphia, just to keep it.
I feel like you're right, but I'm still gonna just double
Oh
check
no, I
for
put
us.
Pittsburgh. I did put Pittsburgh in. I think it's near Pittsburgh. It's in the north of Pennsylvania. I'd never heard of it before, but now they're on the map. Um, so here we have
Yeah, it was Pennsylvania, yeah. Butler,
Butler.
Pennsylvania,
So I might as well change it. We'll just change it for the sake of
just
correct.
to get it right.
Yeah, Butler. Alrighty, so what I want to point out here, and again, this is YouTube, so I have to mention, I have no idea what went on. I'm just telling you what the astrology is telling us, and I want to reiterate that I think we're in a precarious time, and we absolutely need to hold everything lightly and not come to decisions and determine that things were a psyop, or that things were, I don't know, anybody doing one thing or another. We don't know. And
Mm, mm,
we are in a period of chaos. So it can appear that things are being done by a certain actor, even when they're not. And I'd like people to keep that in mind. Even if it favors one party, it doesn't mean that they've done something. And again, that's no defense of anybody. It's simply to recognize this truth that we
be
never
objective.
try to be objective, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here we have the transiting north node. So we've got this north node on the 13th, still at 10. It's at the rounded up 10 degrees yesterday, and it's backing up today as we speak. It's already moved into the 9th degree, so technically the 10th degree. And that north node has been squaring the US sun for some time, and that's part of the last two lunations. It's been in a tighter square with the sun, but it's still in orb of a square of the sun. So that's always, will and always significate the bigger change around the image of the country, but most especially around its leaders. The sun in a mundane chart represents the leaders of a country. We also have the axis squaring now, building to a tighter square with Eris in the second house of values and money resources that the US might have. And that's again where we find Pluto in the US chart. And now we're finding that the transiting Pluto will be back again to within 2 degrees of an orb of conjunction of the natal US Pluto and right on the progressed US Pluto.
Right.
So
Right.
we're really in this time of immense change and transformation. This Mars-Uranus conjunction happened in the 6th house of violence and difficulties and challenges from opponents, from open enemies. This open enemies is the 6th and 7th house in my way of
Right.
things for different reasons. Yeah, and so we see quite a lot going on here. This was the square, so the opening square, what is called the first quarter square of the lunation, which is also significant because it's calling in the nodal axis even more. As you were mentioning, the nodal axis is really important for all lunations. But here we have the opening square of the previous full moon of the 5th of July. So we're right in the middle of the full moon, or rather the new moon and the full moon. And at the opening square, we get this event, which is quite
Right.
brutal for the United States.
Mm.
So I'm not going to dwell on that too much, but I just want to point that out because it's something quite significant, and it's absolutely a key to understanding the imminent changes that the United States is undergoing
Mm,
at the time of this
shooting.
shooting. Yeah. And so here we have, just to pull up the Capricorn full moon for the United States, we have, of course, the lunation directly on Pluto. It's going to be showing now very, very clearly the demise and destruction of empire. That is the Pluto return. That is the significator of for the nations, the Pluto return. Now, it's worth remembering for everybody who finds that really stark, that we live amongst empires that have declined and risen and declined and risen. Empires throughout Africa, throughout Asia, throughout Europe. The Roman Empire was built and collapsed like 2 or 3 times. The Greek, ancient Greece, and then the modern Greek empires were built on the previous. So it's not that things are going to dissolve
Beautiful.
and disappear. We're
Right.
we're in a massive period of change where power is shifting. And because of Pluto moving into Aquarius, power is being fragmented and spread. It's not something that we can centralize any longer. It doesn't work any longer.
What a great, I completely can totally resonate with that, you know. I think especially when dynasties are always piggybacking from these previous dynasties.
Yeah.
Aquarius kind of does represent that sort of Robin Hood kind of energy when it has that universal humanitarian kind of energy. Although again, those who would be grubby and territorial and would prefer to keep the power for themselves are aware that Pluto's coming into Aquarius too. So there's a funny sort of struggle going on between the natural inclinations of the evolution of Pluto coming into Aquarius versus those who have got that territorial Capricorn energy. Because again, Capricorn's energy is not bad.
No, no.
Pluto has Pluto, you know, America has Pluto and Capricorn. That's part of what America is.
Yes, yeah.
But it has to go through, it's going through its Pluto return. It has to go through this wash. And
Mhm.
we see this happening in today's time with this shooting, with probably, I mean, you know, I'm not much of a prophet-y type of person, doomsday sayer type person. I'm really much more of an optimist. But even beyond my optimism, it's good to be objective and unbiased. And there is flux happening. And there's got to be good and bad in order for this flux to happen
Yeah.
for the country, just like with everybody with transformation.
Yeah. So what I'm also seeing, and it's interesting you mentioned about those in power know what they're doing with this Pluto in Aquarius. I would agree with that. And I think that this is why they emphasize so much the AI. If you listen to people who are like sort of power brokers and people behind the scenes, they're obsessed with AI.
Mm,
And with centralizing currency and digitizing ID. That is also Pluto in Aquarius. And so that obsession is about control. So it's not this notion that they're, trying to, I don't know, make people better.
innovate.
It's not
Yeah.
innovation.
Yeah.
It's a new way of controlling. So it's innovative on one level. But we also have some really significant activity here with the Mars-Uranus, where Mars and Uranus were conjoined, and we're speaking on the 14th, so really right now they're conjoined. But even at the time of this full moon in Capricorn, Mars and Uranus are still in a conjunction. Uranus, of course, is in a long-term square to the moon, and in a long-term trine to Pluto in the US chart. So by transit, Uranus all through 2024 and much of 2025 is trining Pluto and squaring the US moon. And we just happen to now have Mars thrown in on this. And if we also think about Algol, the big star, which represents the Perseus beheading the Medusa and constantly trying to create some kind of or subdue, let's say, the monster by decapitating. That's very symbolic of this particular energy. It's, in fact, I think it was the right ear where Trump was hit. Somebody tried to aim for
Mm,
his head. Um,
interesting.
and so that's in a square to the moon, the people. The people are clearly upset. There's a lot of agitation. And this will last for 2024 and 2025 very powerfully, as Uranus trine Pluto, especially even in an individual's life, is going to bring about significant change. We also have Saturn in a building and tight square to Mars all through, well, let's say the second half of 2024 and much of 2025 as well, or at least the first half of 2025. Saturn will be in this tense energy for another month or so while it's moving out of the square, but then it builds to a square with the ascendant and descendant axis, and that's where it stations at 12 degrees in the fourth house of land and the what sustains the United
Right.
States, both of which are ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter currently is on the descendant, and Jupiter itself will be retrograding at that 21-degree point of Mars when it retrogrades. So it's stationing for a long time there at Mars in October. I could go on and on, but I don't want to belabor this point. I just want to point out how this specific event of what's going on here with Trump and the shooting, this attempted assassination, however it pans out, we will not know, but it is here going to make some big change to the structure, let's say, of the United States, and especially the people and how they relate. In terms of hidden
Certainly.
aspects, in terms of like secrecy and things that are not so, that are quite nefarious, I don't really see that, because I do see that Mars and Uranus at the time of that event, if we even call it back now, are in the sixth house of open enemies. So I'm not so sure that this has something to do with things, sorry, let's pull this back, with things that are entirely secret. And again, we have to go right back to the previous day, because this is not today. Sorry, I just need to pull that chart back up
Yep.
again.
Yep. No, you're doing
There
great.
we go. So here we go. So nothing is in the 12th house. So the time descendant on the day is in the 12th. It's ruled by, again, Mars in opposition to the ascendant that is coming away from a conjunction with the descendant. This is about being seen. It's an open situation. I'm not seeing something like a nefarious hidden agenda. I do, again, I'm just saying that from the point
Yeah.
of view of the astrology. I don't know
Right.
if you're seeing anything like that. I see, of course, the sun is in the eighth house. The US has an eighth house sun, so it's kind of like saying everything that it does is for hidden motivations.
Right.
But it's also part of the design of the US. So I'm not seeing,
Right.
I don't know. Do you see that? Do you see
Uh,
anything?
well, like I would agree that, because the States has all these planets in its natural natal eighth house, for better or worse, unconsciously, if we had a person operating through the eighth house this way, they'd be running on compulsions and things in order to purify and purge necessary karmas through their eighth house. And that the States it can be that thing. But in terms of present transits, the sun being in the eighth house during this thing, it's not throwing me any particular loud signals of any uh, secrecy in the way. I think you're kind of right that there's a sort of Uranus and Mars being there in the sixth house. It's a pretty open conflict.
Yeah, and Jupiter in the seventh. It's kind of like we know what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
We may not know their names, but it doesn't feel nefarious. Like if you look at the 9/11 chart and how that lights up the US chart, it's all about that. And
Mm, mm,
whereas here we're looking at something that is more visible. It's a threat that is actually visible. I see
yeah.
it this way anyway. We have the Pluto in opposition to Venus in the ninth as well. So there's a big issue around values and around um yeah, political beliefs, and there's a ninth house is beliefs and political ideology. Uh
Yeah. It's like the States is just kind of being able to sit with confrontations with its people.
yeah,
The people are having these confrontations, and sometimes, like in any relationship, confrontations are going to happen no matter what. And when
yeah,
sixth house transits happen, it's just going to be about let's sit with the tension
yeah.
and let's be patient with each other and work it out. Let it kind of come through. In this case, it bubbled up into a pretty particular heavy outlash or a backlash in this case.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
all right. So listen, this has been really enriching. I'm really glad you were able to sit with me here. I just realized that we've gone for quite some time, an hour and a half, I think we've been going.
oh, no
Um,
kidding.
yeah. Um, but
Well,
uh,
wait.
but yeah, so this is really interesting stuff. We didn't even look at the nakshatras, but I think we're good.
Mm,
We can probably leave it for now. And I thank you so much for being here.
it's
Uh,
truly been my pleasure, Susan. I
Great.
think I had a feeling that when you and I sat together, that there would be a little bit of adjustment on my part because you are wonderful with your videos. I'm seeing being in the energy with you. I think that I appreciate how very meticulous you are about these about tight orbs and about looking at these spans of time. It's been very good practice for me to
Fantastic.
do
Oh,
that
well,
with
that's
you,
a beautiful compliment. Thanks a lot. And
for
can you
sure.
tell everybody watching how they can reach out to you? Because I know you do consultations, you see people in your own practice, and how they can reach you.
Thank you so much, Susan. My name is Dustin Cormier. You can find me as How to Rock Astrology on YouTube. And if anybody's interested in emailing me for anything, feel free to email me at astrology@dustincormier.net. Whether
Excellent.
it's for consultations or for anything, I will be in touch with you.
Excellent. All right. And I will put the links below the video. So I'll make sure people can access that.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Susan.
Listen, it was good to get to know you here. And thanks for being with me and my peeps. And
Thanks so much for inviting me, and it's very nice to be seen by your audience as well.
yeah, thanks for being here. Okay. Take good care.
Take care, guys.